tell you about my real young boyhood, from toddling on up, and what I can remember as a toddler. And then we'll go into my early boyhood years and the things I got into. And I had a very interesting life growing up. There was some excitement in it.
Good.
But I want to tell you first about your granddaddy, my Uncle Alf. And he died, I think it was 45, about the year you were born, Buzzy. You were born in 44?
43.
43. Well, you were a couple of years old when he died. You wouldn't have known him, I don't guess.
I don't know.
But Uncle Alf, and he had the store, Finklea Brothers store, up on Main Street, right next to 301. He was typical Finklea. He was kind of thin. I thought he was tall because I was a little short boy, but he was probably about like Hugh, maybe 5'10" or 11 or something. He always wore his vest and tie when he went to the store. And I always, when he went to the store, and I would be playing in the front yard, he would always speak to me, and I would always speak to him. And one day, I was out on the front yard. We had a crepe myrtle, and I would go out with a gem razor blade and shave the damn crepe myrtle. You know, this loose skin on the crepe. And that was what I was doing when he was coming down the sidewalk. Well, I knew he was coming, but I took my eyes off of him and was doing my shaving on the crepe myrtle with the razor blade. I looked up, and he was standing under a pecan tree that grew between the sidewalk and Rice and the paved. Well, as a matter of fact, it wasn't even paved. Rice Street was dirt when this happened. He had his cane. It was fall, and there were a lot of new pecan leaves down on the ground, and he was taking his cane and moving the leaves around. So I went over and I said, "Uncle Alf, what you looking for?" Well, he reached in his pocket and he got a dime. No, he got a nickel, or I think it was a nickel, yeah. He said, "Boy, I dropped a dime, a little old measly dime, and it's down in those leaves, and I can't find it. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to go to the store, and when I come back in the afternoon, if you have found that dime, that little old sorry dime, I'll give you this big old nickel." Well, Mama heard him. You know, my mama was a real fireball. She came down and she says, "Alf Finklea, you," and she didn't abbreviate it, U-S-O-B. How's my boy ever going to know any value of money if you talk to him like that? He said, "Okay, Miss Hazel." So he went on to the store, and I looked for it. I never did find the dime. That dime is somewhere under the pavement because they have pavement all that area there. But that was my most vivid recollection of Uncle Alf. And Aunt Polly, you remember your grandmama very much?
Yeah, I remember my grandmama, yeah.
Well, Aunt Polly, I was her, before all you kids came along, I was her favorite. She never went down to see her, but I'd go down to see her every day because she'd give me tennis balls, those slick with all the stuff on, because they had a tennis court right there by her house. And
That's right.
they used it until Marion and Tracy went off to during the war, And so she just had it all plowed up and made lawn out of it. But it was a clay tennis court. And it was one of 2 or 3 that were in Latta. Duncan Dew had a court of his own. Aunt Polly had her tennis court for Marion and Tracy. And there was a tennis court on Bamberg Street, back up, you know that, when you turn at the church to go down toward Bamberg Street.
Yeah.
There's a open field back in there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a tennis court back in there at one time. Tennis was a big deal. And when all the boys went off to the war, the tennis courts were neglected. And when they came back, tennis had kind of died off in Latta until they built the cement courts down at the park. They put those down. And Haynes Stafford, I think, had a lot to do with that, because he still played. He was one of the few people who played tennis anymore. And he taught everybody around here how to play tennis. Him and Mr. Duncan Dew. Duncan Dew, when he was middle-aged, could whip the 15, 16-year-old boys playing tennis. He was really good. Did I stray, or did I get off course what we were talking about?
Aunt Polly's tennis court and giving you the tennis balls.
Yeah. Oh, Aunt Polly was she'd give me the tennis balls. And I'd go down, and I never knew her when she wasn't in the wheelchair. I think she had, it wasn't, it was something hard, what was it she had that made her cripple? Rheumatic fever is what she had.
Yeah.
But Uncle Alf and Aunt Polly, before you and Bev Jenks and LaFawn came along, I was her boy. And Hugh didn't go down there that way. He was doing Hugh things, but I was a prowler. I controlled Rice Street. That was my beat. But I remember, I think Uncle Alf died while we moved to Sumter for a couple of years during the war, and I think he died about the end of the war, 44, 45, something, about the time you were born, Buzzy.
I was born in 43, and I don't remember.
Yeah. But he was a real fine Southern gentleman. He had his vest on. He'd go to work, come by the house. He had a cane. He didn't use it. He twirled it and he played with it. And every now and then he'd put it on the ground, but he had it mostly for looks. But he was kind of tall, and he was Finklea thin, you know, just like Hugh when he was younger, and me. A little tall. He would have been taller than me, but he was. And he always had a cigar. But it never was lit. Aunt Polly would not let him smoke in the house, and so he chewed them. And he chewed them till there was nothing left to him. And he'd pull out another one, and he kept a bunch of them in his vest pocket, just lined with pens and cigars. Before I forget it, I want to tell you about my Uncle Wayne. Do you remember Uncle Wayne? Well, my Uncle Wayne, my daddy had a sister, my Aunt Lizzie.
Yeah, I knew.
And Uncle Wayne.
Oh, yeah, I remember him, yeah.
Well, Aunt Lizzie never learned to read or write. I think she must have been dyslexic because she was smart as a whip. she could fix things and do things and arts and crafts. So I think there must have been she had some kind of disability that probably now could have been, repaired or corrected. Uncle Wayne lived 50 years without speaking a word. And he could only grunt. He had one hand that had a thumb and a little finger. But every day he got his bath, a change of clean clothes, a white shirt, bib overalls, and Aunt Lizzie was with him 24 hours a day. That was her calling in life, was to look after him. And he died when he was 50, without ever speaking a word. He just made grunts. But he was the favorite of folks. He'd go down to Rogers drugstore. We had two drugstores, McCrite's on one side of the street where Cornbluth's is, and Rogers drugstore was by the theater. And the men would go into especially Rogers drugstore, and tell lies and smoke their cigars, and Mr. Hughes Manning and those gentlemen. And if Lizzie ever took him down on Main Street, he liked to go in the drugstore because they were buying cigars. And but he never smoked, he just chewed them. But one day, Wayne was in the drugstore and two boys started picking on him. Well, nobody picked on Wayne. He was protected. The whole town loved Wayne. And these boys were picking on him. They were grown men. He just should have known better. The boys had just left the high school boys had just left the football field and were coming home from practice, and two of them walked by and saw this man picking on Wayne. The two of them went and grabbed him, grabbed the boy, by his neck, by his nape of his neck and seat of his pants, and threw him out in the main street. Nobody picked on Wayne. Nobody looked after him. But we talk about my Aunt Lizzie, who looked after Wayne. That was her calling in life. And she was, she saw that he was dressed and starched and clean and shaved and
Alton has told me for years that Wayne would walk down each side of the street and all the shopkeepers would fill those bib overhauls, they're full of pockets.
Oh yeah, he'd go up to the red light. The first building was Parham Furniture Company, John Parham Company. Still written on the wall.
Yep.
And then the next there was a little kiosk, and it was no, it wasn't. The next was a little general mercantile store that Fred Parham had. And it was just general stuff. And he would always give Wayne cigars and stuff like that, candy bars. He wore bib overalls with all these pockets, so when he come home, he was stuffed with candy and baby Ruths and stuff like that, and his cigars. Where was I?
Talking about your Aunt
we
Lizzie.
were there at, I have to tell you about that little store that Fred Parham had. It's where I got my lesson on honesty and I went by the store one day and I saw a cap with a bill on it. And it was one of these caps that had the flaps that you tie at the top, like a Mackinac, I think they call it back then. And there was one of them sitting there. Well, I helped myself to that cap. Well, my aunts up in Clive had given me 75 cents a piece. No. One gave me 2 quarters, and one gave me 1 quarter, so I had 75 cents. And I took that cap home. I was wearing it. And my mom said, "Where'd you get the cap?" I said, "I bought it from Mr. Fred Parham at his store." I had ripped it off. And when she knew it was a lie, she says, "You come with me, Alton Finklea. We're going downtown. Put the cap on your head. Our first stop is going to be Mr. Fred Parham's store." And we went, and Mr. Fred came out. He said, "Now I want you to thank Mr. Fred for giving you that hat." "Boy, I didn't give you no hat." "No," said Mr. Fred, "I took the hat, and I'm sorry. And I will never take anything from you, and I ain't gonna never take nothing from nobody else that don't belong to me, because my mama is gonna whip my butt when I get home." I was about 5 years old, like 5, maybe 6. And she did. She tore my butt up. But I had to go face Mr. Fred, and I would have taken 10 beatings if she would have let me not have to go talk to Mr. Fred. But after I got the apology done, Mr. Fred said, "Boy, come here. I want you to know that you're welcome to come in my store anytime you want to. Because I'll miss you if you don't come to my store." I said, I will, Mr. Fred. So he made me feel that I was completely exonerated. So, we're still talking about a little boy, huh?
So did you get to keep the hat, or did you have to give it back?
I gave it back. I had to get it
Poor
back.
Mr. Fred couldn't even sell a brand new hat now.
But that was that's the last time I ever stole anything. It was the last time I ever lied to anybody. Because when I got home, my mama tore my butt up. I got a lot of whoopings, and her weapon of choice was pyracantha.
What's that?
You know what a pyracantha
No.
looks like?
Uh-uh.
It's got red berries, and it's got gnarly, got little spikes all over the stems of it. When she'd take those pyracantha, we had one growing by the garage back. That was where she'd get her switches from. But that's what she used, was the pyracantha. So, where were we?
Need a light on.
Well, let's walk down Main Street.
Okay.
And I'm 4 years old. I'm 10 years old.
Okay.
So we go by John Parham's big store.
Mhm.
And we've been to Mr. Fred Parham's
Right.
mercantile store. The next store was a jewelry store. I had no reason to go there. I didn't have any money or anything. Then we came to the theater.
Yeah.
And the Mr. Wade McMillan owned several theaters. He had one in Bamberg, one upstate. He was in like a consortium or something. It wasn't just him that owned them. And so he opened the one in Latta. And he put the marquee out there. I cannot remember the marquee not being there. When it first opened up, it didn't have the marquee. But I can remember when, if you wanted to go to the movie, you had to go to Dillon. I remember the first movie I went to.
What was that?
I don't know the name of the movie, and I don't know who acted in it. I only think it was Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, because in the movie, the person I think was Spencer Tracy knocked the crap out of the woman and knocked her across the bed. And that's all I can remember about that movie.
Wow.
But I went to another movie in Dillon, and my daddy had come home for the weekend, and Mama said, Alton went to the movies over in Dillon this week. He said, well, what'd you see, boy? I saw the movie, and Aunt Polly was in the movie. Aunt Polly was in a wheelchair all the time I ever knew her. And Aunt Polly was in the movie. I said, is that right? I can say, yes, sir. And Mama overheard the conversation. Said, hey, Alton said Aunt Polly was in the movie over in Dillon at the theater. Mama laughed. She says, that was Ethel Barrymore in her wheelchair. And both were very eloquent ladies, both in a wheelchair, and so I just
Oh, that was her.
that was Aunt Polly.
Put it together.
And that's about as far as back as I can remember being real young. But
He always said that when they went to the movies, it was either going to be an Eastern or a Western play.
a Western, if it ain't warm a Western, it had to be an Eastern. And I didn't like Easterns. And the only time you got to see a Western was on Sunday, on Saturday. And we'd go at 11 o'clock, and they'd start. And at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd come out and they'd play the same thing over and over. And Mr. Wade McMillan, you remember him?
Oh, yeah.
You don't remember? That was Shirley, you know Shirley?
I know Shirley.
That was her daddy. He had the movie house. Then we had Rogers Drugstore, looking toward the railroad track from the stoplight. We had a drugstore there, and across the street was a Rexall drugstore. We had two drugstores. And Dr. McCry had it. You remember Dr. McCry?
Yeah.
Well, he closed his down. Cornbloots was next door, and they wanted to expand. And so he built a little drugstore out by the Esso station, out by the stoplight. The Esso station was a little, that's where what's that now? What's there now, Buzzy?
Tiger Mart?
It's,
Where Roy Powell had his Esso station.
well, it's,
You know that big store at the stoplight? Big.
Yeah.
Okay, it was not there.
Kind of by where Lee Builders is?
his store.
Are you talking, was it kind of like where Lee Builders is?
No, it's on this side of the road
Okay.
where where the gas station is.
Okay.
But Mr. Roy Powell had a small service station with 2 pumps, Esso. And he had 2 bays, one for lubrication and one for washing the cars. It's a little small station. And over to the left of it, on 301, where the parking lot for the Presbyterian Church is, was a great big house. It was the Finnegan house.
Yeah, I remember
It was
that.
a big 2-story house, painted brown,
Yeah.
and it sat across the street from the street that the McCutcheons had for a while
Yeah.
now. And they tore it down and expanded the station and gave room for the Presbyterians to have a parking lot. But that's one of my favorite stores I go to is that station. Going down Main Street, we passed by the theater. We have Rogers Drug Store. And then Mr. John Parham had a 5 and dime.
Hmm.
And then that was where the bank is now. The bank was an old bank.
Mhm.
We had 2 banks in Latta. The Latta Depository, that's where the bank is now. It's different, it's torn down and built a new bank. Across the street was the Farmers and Merchants Bank, and that's where Fred Ellis has his clock shop.
Okay.
Then we had Corn Bloops. Then we had the Ford place, the alleyway, but on Main Street that they made a little park out of.
Uh-huh.
On the north, on the railroad side of it was the Ford agency. Yeah, they had to drive the cars down that alleyway and turn in the back. And they had room for 1 car in the showroom. The Chevrolet place, Tracy Finklea opened it up in '32 when he got out of Furman. I think you had to be awarded, get this award to get a dealership, but he got it. That was his graduation this Chevrolet place. And it was up on the corner. Y'all remember where it used to be, don't you? Where it was?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big warehouse there now.
Mm-hmm.
And it had where the office of it had 1 showroom, had an entrance on the side street, and then out in the back you could drive a car right through it. There's only room for about 3 cars in there,
Yeah, 3 or 4 cars.
and 1 in the showroom.
Yeah.
And he was in partnership with Doc Hyman, and it was F&H Chevrolet. Finklea and Hyman Chevrolet. F&H, yeah. Or is it H and it was
F&H Chevrolet.
F&H.
Mm-hmm.
And Doc Hyman got the Buick agency over in Dillon. He was from Dillon anyway. He wasn't from Latta. And they were partners and for a short while, and then Tracy bought him out, and he still kept the name F&H Chevrolet Company for years. I don't know when they changed it, Buzzy, but
I don't know.
you don't remember when it was F&H?
No. I remember when it was F&H, but I don't know when they changed it.
Yeah, I think it was when I was gone. I came back and it was just Finklea Chevrolet. And Morris and Cox had the Ford place. One time we had a Chrysler place.
So,
Earl Atkinson's brother, Earl Atkinson, who had Dillon Oil Company, had a brother that had Dodge agency, Dodge and Chrysler. And so they put a Dodge agency in Latta for a while. It didn't stay open very long.
Where was it?
Huh?
Where was it?
Where F&H Chevrolet is.
Okay.
What was I going to
We had a
Gilmore.
Chrysler Dodge dealership here too. Herbert Taylor ran it, but I don't know who owned it. I don't know if he owned it as well.
It wasn't open very long. It was just
Yeah.
Dillon Oil Company. You know where Dillon got his name?
Yeah.
Dillon, Marion County. And when it first opened, they started opening, it was a Richfield, was the name of the gas brand, Richfield. And then it changed to Mobil, and then changed to Shell. But Dillon was Dillon, Dillon, Marion. It was an acronym. All kind. And that's and Earl Atkinson ran Dillon in Latta. And he had a brother who ran the one in Marion. And then they finally split up, and it was just Latta. Dillon and Latta. Dillon and Latta. Mr. Earl Atkinson. He was the richest man in Latta. The first Cadillac that ever come to Latta. You know who had it? Mr. Willie Parrott. He had a maroon Cadillac. Well, Tracy Finklea wasn't going to let him get ahead of him. And he had the second one. He had a black one. And it wasn't then until Earl Atkinson bought a Cadillac. So that was the three Cadillacs. Mr. Willie's, Tracy Finklea, and Mr. What was the other one I was telling you?
Atkinson.
yeah, Mr. Atkinson.
Mr. Atkinson, he got him a Cadillac.
You remember anything about my dad's airplane? So it's been the first airplane in Latta.
Yep. I hardly remember that, but it was a proper Cub, wasn't it? But I remember seeing it, and they had an airport. And the airport was right over here where this house is, across my neighbor. It was over there where, what's my buddy over here's name?
Mitchell Gardner.
Where Mitchell Gardner lives was all pine trees.
Mhm.
Just like those pine trees over here. The planes would have to come down just over those pine trees. And about the time, and the landing strip was right back over here, and it went all the way to Academy Street, the landing strip.
All the way back down Drunk Lane, probably.
And there was nothing out
Or
at
close to it.
Forest Hills. Was no such animal as Forest Hills. But they cleared all the pine trees and everything, so they would have the hangar and the windsock. All airports, you have to have that windsock, so where there's no canvas on it, but it's a galvanized pole with a circle that holds
The windsock.
the windsock. And it's in
It's back behind here, back behind
If you take
Ladette's.
take this drunk lane,
Okay.
it's right behind, what's those boys, the two brothers?
The Lanes,
Huh?
or the Bethys
The
and
Buffet boys.
John
Yeah.
Lane lives there
Okay.
now, but it's
Yeah.
on that property.
It's in their backyards, right behind their backyard.
And do you know there's a patch down here, right before you get down to the entrance of the lane, that has had a horrible time growing grass. And I swear they must have done an oil dump over there or something, because it does not grow anything.
Really?
Yep.
Mhm.
It's just a straggly weed here and there. That's it.
That's wild.
But that was the airport, and Tracy was in business with partnership with that airplane. Who else was in on that, Buzzy? Did he ever tell you?
I don't know. I never did.
Alton, tell Betsy about the.
I flew in that airplane. No, I didn't. I flew in Little Earl's. Little Earl had an airplane there. I got to fly in it. He had a couple of airplanes. When he worked for Dillon here. What'd you say, Dad?
Betsy, do you know anything about the Latta branch?
No.
Tell her about the Latta
Okay.
branch.
There's a piece of history. If you when you drive out tonight or this afternoon, you'll see it. It's Buzzy. Keep your eye open when you ride down through there. You'll see a berm. Where
You're going down our lane,
Mhm.
and if you look to the left,
there'll
It's
be a
a
ditch
really
there,
high
but
berm.
across the ditch will be a berm. And that was where they built the road up for a railroad.
the
Cool.
Latta
And
branch.
it was a branch it's called the Latta branch, and it went from Latta to Clow. The seaboard was getting all of the cotton hauled down to Latta to get on the Atlantic coastline to go south, probably to Georgetown or Charleston, to the ports. Well, somebody wanted some of that revenue, so they said, we're going to put another railroad in. They put the Latta branch in that went from Clow to Duncan Hughes Warehouse. And it went right straight across here. And it had, I think it was what they call narrow gauge. It was a small, the rails were closer together and had a little bit smaller engines and stuff. But back then there was a steam engine. And a steam engine can go just as fast backwards as it can forward. So there was no place for it to turn around. So what do you call it? It went back and forth, backwards and forwards like that. It
You
never
didn't
turned
do a
around.
turnaround.
And it went from here to Clow, and all cotton. And it had a passenger car. Where people, I remember riding on it once because my mama lived in Clow. Came from Clow. And we would ride the Latta branch back and forth. And another railroad that was a seaboard that came from Maxton, North Carolina, through Clow and went to Dillon and crossed over between here and Dillon and went to Georgetown. They went that way. So we had the Latta branch and we had it. When the war came along, the government asked all these railroad companies, says, if you got any railroad that are really not making you a lot of money, if you'll give us the steel, off those railroads will give you twice the value of the rail. And so the Latta branch, they tore it up
Oh, Lord.
and they sold it. Now the only remnant of that railroad is right down this road here.
Okay.
You can almost walk across our yard and see the berm.
Oh yeah,
as
and
well.
right, and where it turns, where you turn, you'll notice it's built up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the remnant of the Latta Branch Railroad.
That's cool.
That's, most people don't remember.
Mm-mm. I've never heard of it.
Ain't nobody alive there. Maybe some of the old lady folks, but they wouldn't be interested in the railroad, I don't guess.
Ask Alton about cars, planes, trucks, trains, you got it.
But the Latta Branch existed from 1888, when Latta was formed, until 1941. When the war started, they dug it up, dug all the steel up. But I rode on it once. They had a passenger train they called the Bow Weevil. Remember the Bow Weevil?
Yeah, I've heard it before.
A little train, a little narrow branch, narrow gauge is what they call it, railroad, the Bow Weevil. You went to Cloud. Finally, they moved over where it went to Little Rock, all the way to Georgetown. They didn't come through Latta anymore, or come to Latta anymore. The fast trains back then was the Orange Blossom Special, and it was the Seaboard. It's called the Seaboard Airline. And you had the Atlantic Coastline. There's two different railroads. They were in competition. They joined up later on, now it's just the Atlantic Coastline, or they joined the names together. But
You gonna tell Betsy your railroad story?
what?
Are you gonna tell Betsy your railroad story?
About what?
The army?
What?
The army and you as a little boy?
Who?
The army. You and Tony Atkins.
Oh yeah.
That's a good story.
When it was during the war, the big war, World War, WW2, Tony Atkins lived across the street from me. You remember Mac Atkins? You remember Miss Esther?
Yeah.
You remember Miss Esther Atkins? Well, Tony, he lived across the street where the swimming pool is. There used to be a great old big house there. It was
Oh, where that motel was.
the Rapers lived there at one time.
Or is.
And then well anyway, me and Tony were playing along the railroad track. He'd get on one rail and I'd get on the other, and we could see who could go the furthest without falling off. Going heel to toe, walking the rails, heel to toe, and balancing yourself. Usually the trains would stop up there about where Manning Shine's office was. And that's where this train had stopped this particular day. And me and Tony were walking along the railroad track on the side. And it was a troop train hauling soldiers. They're coming out of Fort Bragg, up there, Fort Bragg, right? Out of Fayetteville. And we were walking along there, and this soldier he got off on, it was the caboose. He walked out of the back of the caboose, and he was going to relieve himself out on the railroad. And we were walking along, and he was out there doing his thing. And I pick up a couple of railroad rocks, and I threw railroad rock. I didn't throw him at his head or anything. I just kind of threw them at him to aggravate him. Made him mad. And he starts coming after me. And I'm running down the track between the rails on the rocks, barefoot probably. And he's a soldier, young soldier, and he's just been through training and he can run. He runs me down and grabs me. And he drags me all the way back to the back of that train. And he puts me up on the caboose. Well, it was full of soldiers. Now, he was a sergeant, this guy. They grabbed me. And he was drunk. And those other young fellas, you know, they're just kind of standing back. They weren't going to mess that sergeant. But they were talking to him, said, Sergeant Jordan, you need to put that boy back. You know, I could hear them. They're on my side. You know, train starts taking off.
No.
Steam engine. I could hear it chugging. And I'm yelling and screaming, get me off of this train. Well, the train gets past, the back end of the train is past Duncan Dew's office, and it's getting up some steam. And finally, a lieutenant comes back there. Well, what in the hell is this boy doing on this train? So he pulls the cord to stop the train. The train stops. Boy, do you know how to get on? I said, yeah, right down them tracks. He said, well, you go. So I got to ride about a quarter of a mile probably on the train with the trollers.
You had spent time with your dad around Army people, though.
Huh?
Had you spent time around your dad and Army bases?
Oh,
where
yeah.
it didn't scare him, but it just, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was a uniformed civilian. He taught truck mechanics
Okay.
to sergeants, so motor sergeants. So all during the war, he wore a uniform except on the weekends. So he wore a uniform for work. And we lived a while in Sumter. He was stationed he was working at Fort Jackson and Shaw Army Airfield, working on, and we lived in Sumter, and he would take me to work with him. And I'd go to class. He had classes on batteries. I went to a class one time and sat in he knew I was behaving myself, and so I sit in the back. Soldiers would sit over here, and my dad would have his podium and his blackboard and everything, and I would sit through the class. And then we'd get in his Jeep. He had a Jeep with Mr. Finklea right on the front of it. We'd ride around the base and look at the other trucks and tanks, and he'd show me all. I got this half tracks. You ever see a half track? It's half tank and half truck. And we went down to see those one day, and they were lined up as far as you could see them on both sides. He said, you want to climb up? He helped me get on top of one of them and sit up in the seat where the steering wheel was. And one day, when we lived in Wilmington, we went up to a place called Camp Davis. It was a temporary base just for the war. It was right on the edge of the Marine base up there above Wilmington. And he took me up where they were having it was a firing range where they were shooting at a target pulled by an airplane with a long rope. And they would pull it along the beach, and they had guns up on the beach, and they would shoot at it. And they had an observation place where you could sit up on the hill behind the dunes. And I sit there and watch him shoot the targets as it goes by. Which, well, 11-year-old boy, that's quite an experience.
Well, I bet it's hard.
But that was a lot of fun. But he took me to a lot of places. Hugh never went anywhere with him for some reason. I don't know. It was always me. I'd tag along. And he spent a lot of time with me.
I'm out of the others.
I love my daddy. He taught me how to behave. He never laid a hand on me. Never touched me. Except to hug me. Had no reason to. If he cleared his breath, I cleared his throat. I say, "Sir, what you want me to do?" "Yes, sir, I'll do it." He taught me to behave, and strictly just his demeanor. My mama beat the crap out of me. There wasn't a week went by that I didn't get a good one. My brother and I were fighting one day out in front of the house and out in the grassy area. And he's much bigger and stronger than I was, but he had me down. He had me pushing my face in the dirt and the sand of the grass. He wasn't hurting me, I don't guess, but he was mostly just embarrassed me, you know. I was cussing at him and making fun, you know, I was picking on him and he don't show me who's boss. And my mama comes out and sees what he's doing and she grabs him and starts wearing him out. And I start laughing. You know, she's beating on Hugh, you know. And I'm laughing, and Mama quits whipping him long enough, and said, "Boy, you're going to get yours as soon as I get through with him." And she did, she tore him off. "Well, why are you beating on me? He was whipping me." He said, you must have said something bad that make him that mad. You had to have said something bad.
Hugh was perfect.
But
He was a good boy. He wasn't anything like Alton.
But Hugh and I were, I wonder if we were really brothers. There was nothing, there wasn't no love lost between us growing up.
They got older, though. They were
But
two peas in a pod.
One of Hugh's stories. My daddy come home for the weekend, was going to do something up on the roof, and he put a ladder up to the roof. The roof had a steep, real steep top on it. I got on the ladder and I was about 4. I could walk, and I was walking up the ladder. Just as I was climbing up on the roof, my brother goes in. Is Alton supposed to be on top of the house? And it happened to be a weekend when my dad was home. And he came right, I don't know what would happen if my daddy hadn't been home. And he only came home on the weekends, that was during the war. I guess Hugh would have had to try to get me down. Well, I don't know if I could have got down backwards or not, but I was climbing up there. I was just to the eaves of the roof when he hollered. Daddy come running out there, and he climbed up there and got me. He moved the ladder.
I bet he did.
I was a climbing fool. We had an apple tree, a big old tree. To me, it was big. That garage was there, and behind the garage was a little greenhouse, a little glass house for potting plants. You couldn't even stand up in it, but you could put your potted plants in there and let them bulbs go in there, and then a glass top. It had panes with glass with like chicken wire in the glass. You ever see that, Buzzy?
Yeah.
Well, I was in the apple tree out on a limb, and that limb was right over that little house, that little glass house. The limb breaks.
Can't see it anymore.
Can't see it no more.
No, it's not there anymore.
Okay, it was right
You outlived a scar.
Maybe it was this way. I don't know, but it was right along in here. My leg goes right through the glass. And the glass didn't hurt me. It was a damn wire, galvanized wire.
Yeah.
Had points on it. And it tore my leg up. They had to put stitches in my leg. And Dr. Bill Buzzy was our doctor at the time. We had Dr. Edwards, but he died, I think, the year the war was over. And so Dr. Bill Buzzy was our doctor. He put stitches in me. Henry Smith and I, my buddy, we were sleeping out one night in a tent. My dad, a pup tent my dad had brought. Well, I woke up during the night and my finger was throbbing. And it had turned purple. It kept me up all night. Early in the morning, my mama took me down to Dr. Buzzy, and he looked at it. He said, "That's a black widow spider bite." He said, "That boy got bit by a black widow spider." And he lanced it.
Huh.
But that's just some of the stuff that's happened to me growing up.